I met Ed back in 2021 when I first moved to York, and he'd seen that I moved to the city on Instagram, and he invited me out for a coffee and we had a chat. And I was immediately impressed by this young man in his early 20s who'd already, off his own bat, started a business for himself in the city as a nightclub photographer. We met up every few months after that, but fast forward a couple of years to the week of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Ed and I decided to go to a movie. We went to watch The Batman. And afterwards we went out for burgers. And while we were sitting over the table, Ed was sharing with me how much this invasion was weighing on his soul. And he just felt like he had to do something about it. I knew Ed wasn't saying this naively because he was a young man who put himself in dangerous situations to help other people regularly, volunteering for the riverboat rescue in York. But I still decided to ask him, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Absolutely." So I decided to put him in touch with my friend Andre from Prague. And you actually know Andre if you followed this channel for a while, because I did a documentary with him a few years ago about his work and photojournalism in Ukraine. Fast forward again to now in 2025, and Ed has been backwards and forwards to Ukraine on multiple trips, taking photographs, making videos, working with charities, even forming his own. And he now spends the majority of his year in Ukraine, helping out as much as he can to create content and awareness for what's actually going on over there. I wanted to share this interview with Ed here on this channel because I find his story and his example so inspiring. Here's a young man in his 20s who's put his life on hold in a lot of ways because he decided that he had to do something about a situation that he saw in the world where he wanted to make a difference. And he knew that he had a skill set with a camera, so he decided to go and see how he could help out. Just a couple of things to say before I run the interview. And the first is that Ed is wearing a patch on his arm in this interview, and it's the Ukrainian flag, and he knows and I know, and you'll see that the flag is upside down. It was a simple mistake. It had gone through the laundry and been put on upside down by somebody else, and he didn't notice. We would have filmed the interview again, but obviously he's in Ukraine now and won't be back for a while. So I hope it's not too much of a distraction. And also to say that Ed has already won a number of awards for his photography, which is obviously too self-effacing to talk about, but I'm so proud of him for this work that he's done and how he's been recognized. I'm going to show those images at the end and let you know in text what awards he's actually won so far. And lastly, and I never asked for this directly here on this channel, but please share this video with as many people as you can. And I'll tell you why. I can't put ads on this video because YouTube will flag it because it has sensitive content in it. And I don't mind that I make no ad revenue off this video. That doesn't concern me at all. But YouTube's algorithm will not promote videos that don't have ads on it because there's no financial incentive to do so for YouTube. So I'm relying on you to help me share this video. I hope as you watch this video that the reason will be obvious, that I really want to share Ed's work and his story and help him to get as much support behind what he's doing as possible. So I'm relying on you to really help me promote this one as much as you can. I'll leave links to Ed's work down in the description of this video. After you finish watching, please go through, spend some time with his work, maybe subscribe to his newsletter, support him by buying a copy of his magazine, and make sure to follow along with a photographer who's doing important work that he really believes in. But that's enough from me. I'm going to shut up now and let you hear from my friend, Edward Matthews.
So I started out in photography when I was probably about 14, 15. I had a little iPod Touch 4th generation. It was nothing exciting, but it kind of ignited this little spark for taking images. And I'd walk around my village, just happy snapper, taking photos of baby lambs or nice flowers, you know, those cliche photos that we all took. At this point in my life, I was still at school, obviously, and I was going through a bit of a rough patch in my A-levels, and unfortunately I did really badly in the first year. In terms of the technical aspects of photography, I was doing quite well, but in terms of the academic side, the essay writing, the the other stuff, I was struggling. Unfortunately, I dropped out of my A-levels after the first year, and I ended up as a swimming teacher, actually, full-time swimming teacher and lifeguard on an apprenticeship scheme at Tadcaster Swimming Pool. Also didn't quite finish the academic side of the apprenticeship, but whilst I was doing that, I was still taking photos, and York actually flooded really badly at that time. Tadcaster was hit really badly. Our swimming pool had to close due to the flooding. So the pool manager basically said to us, go out into the community and help where you can. We'll pay you for your time. And so I picked up my camera and I took it out. I was just documenting the flooding, and that connection with photography and flooding then led on to me joining York Rescue Boat when I became 18. York Rescue Boat was quite an important part in my development, professional development, and understanding of what it is to be a good person, to volunteer, to understand the fragility of life. There was a really interesting dynamic working in a nightclub and also volunteering on a local lifeboat. There were occasions where the two roles would intersect, and sometimes somebody who I'd taken a photo of in the nightclub would then be a call out just minutes later. I think it was the 13th of April 2019. A 19-year-old was in Cuda. I took a photo of him, and about 40 minutes after I left the nightclub, we had a call out. At the time, I didn't know who it was for, but somebody had gone in the river at Blue Bridge, and we spent some time looking for him, and it was disclosed that he'd been in this nightclub, and I had a photo of him. And so to recover his body 2 days later was quite difficult for me, because at that time I thought I could save everyone. You're in a role where you're doing it because you want to help the community, you want to save people, and suddenly realizing that you can't save everyone is a really difficult thing, but it's a really important lesson to learn. I was working at Cuda, which is where we are now, filming this interview, and I was just travelling home at about 3 o'clock in the morning on the 24th of February 2022. And sometimes when I get home, I like to edit photos straight after the club, just so everything's fresh in my mind. And for some reason, I decided to also open Facebook. I was really shocked to see kind of my worst fears. I was aware that there was Russian soldiers amassing in Belarus and on the Russian border of Ukraine. I saw that they had invaded, and I was in this really weird situation where I was one of the first people to see it, because I was watching it live on my Facebook newsfeed minutes after things were happening. I was trying to edit photos, but I was just compelled by what I was seeing of just this invasion. And I'd been aware of the war in Ukraine since 2014, when Russia first annexed Crimea, Donetsk and Luhansk. And I had this interest that I never thought I would have a means of fulfilling. But this new full-scale invasion, I genuinely felt that I wanted to do something about it. I didn't know what at that point, but I wanted to do something. There was a moment where I thought I wanted to go and fight, because previously I wanted to join the Royal Air Force as a photographer, but unfortunately, due to a back injury, I'm probably ineligible for military service for life. But I have a skill. When I actually arrived there on the border in Poland, I realised suddenly the gravity of the situation, and I realised that I just didn't want to take photos and leave. This was something that would lead on to a passion project, using photography and video for like philanthropy. I put my cameras down and started volunteering, because I didn't want to be that guy who took photos and left. I wanted to genuinely make a positive difference. And then once I'd established myself in the volunteer community, that was a really important time to pick up my camera again. All of a sudden, I'm volunteering with these charities that I really want to help, but I've got no finance, I've got no means of financially supporting them. I can give them man hours, but I could also give them content. I can also give them photo and video content. And all of a sudden, I'm able to help these organizations with social media and provide professional content to help them build websites. And so they could reach much bigger donor bases. Those photos and videos significantly increased their donor funding. And over time, I deliberately took it really slowly, but over time I moved into Ukraine a little bit more, working with different organizations. One of the most important things that I'm doing now was a charity that I started working for in 2024 called FireAid. Now, I started working with FireAid because they had been sending fire trucks to Ukraine, and I'd been seeing that there was a number of fire trucks that had come from the UK being donated, but no one had really seen or heard of them since they crossed the border. And so with my connection to search and rescue, I had this interest in the emergency services and how the Ukrainian state emergency services were working during the war. So I just started kind of independently investigating this. And over time, I managed to find a couple of vehicles, some in deoccupied territories in the east of Ukraine. One of these vehicles was a water tanker that came from Jersey, and it was actually being used to take water, drinking water, to the town of Kupiansk. So they had no running water, they had no electricity, and this was a real lifeline for them. So this story is really great. And I put a photo on Instagram, and the charity got in touch and said, "Oh, we really love this photo. Can we use it?" And I said, "Oh, well, I really want to tell this story. Can I work with you?" And so they were really transparent at first, and they said, "We've got no money, but we'll try and get some funding. We'll try and get some grant funding or some sort of budget to sort you out to at least support you and sustain you." And I said, "That sounds fantastic. I don't really need more than I need to sustain living." And so I started working with FireAid, and it's kind of turned into my full-time work now. In April 2024, we had a convoy of 31 fire trucks, which was my first major work with FireAid. And so I filmed them leaving Dover and then picked them back up once they were in Ukraine, being handed over to the state emergency services. And then I even managed to follow a couple to their end destinations in different parts of Ukraine. One of them's now actually just on the edge of the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And so seeing these vehicles leaving the UK and then ending up on pretty much the front lines in some places is absolutely incredible. And just knowing that I've been a part of that and advocating for Ukrainian firefighters is really important. A firefighter in Ukraine doesn't become a firefighter because of the financial gain. They become a firefighter because they want to serve their community, they want to help people. There's this really kind of unique kind of family feel around the Ukrainian fire service. These firefighters who are working on the front lines, some of them had been in occupied territory, and so they had made that decision to stay in their role through the most awful conditions with no food, no water, no electricity, and they somehow managed to maintain their work because they wanted to serve their community. And that says it a lot. Even though their lives were at risk during occupation, some of these firefighters just said there was no question whether they would stay. Of course they would stay, because that's what they signed up for. And I realised that the Ukrainian fire service is underrepresented in international media. And so I wanted to kind of amplify and tell more stories about Ukrainian firefighters. Whilst I'm working with FireAid, I filmed a kind of a promotional video for the charity to showcase their amazing work over the last 2 years. I had a little bit of funding to make this film, and whilst I was filming, I met some people who would again change my perspective and made me realise these are some of the most inspiring people I've ever met. One person of particular note is a guy called Igor in Dnipro.
Як би це банально не звучало, мені це питання вже задавали неодноразово, але скажу ще раз, це мрія дитинства. Саме приємна частина нашої роботи, коли на добовому чергуванні взагалі не було жодного виклику. Це значить, що у людей не трапилось якогось горя, якоїсь біди, і їм не потрібна була наша допомога. Але коли вже трапляється небезпечна подія, саме приємне, коли тобі та твоїм колегам вдалося врятувати чиєсь життя, майно або навіть життя звичайної тварини, це також приємно. Сказати, що війна радикально змінила нашу роботу, я не можу сказати. Але роботи у рятувальників та пожежних України стало набагато більше. Нам в першу чергу довелося змінити своє спорядження. Тому що до і так нелегкого обладнання рятувальника додались такі засоби захисту, як кевларова каска та бронежилет, який значно зробив важчим наше спорядження. Також нам тепер набагато частіше доводиться працювати з великими руйнуваннями будівель, житлових, промислових. Нам доводиться працювати з набагато більшою кількістю потерпілих. Тому роботи стало набагато більше і робота стала набагато тяжкою, як в фізичному плані, так і в моральному. Додаткові небезпеки з'явились такі, як повторні артилерійські або арт-удари, або удари по підрозділам, які працюють в прифронтових зонах, удари по нашим підрозділам FPV-дронами або мінометними снарядами. Це додаткова загроза скидів боєприпасів на наші підрозділи. Тому ризиків для рятувальників стало більше. Мій батько також з початком повномасштабної війни вдягнув форму і зараз працює та боронить нашу державу. Він на своєму фронті, я на своєму фронті. Один за одного переживаємо, якщо якісь там масовані атаки відбуваються або вибухи. СМС-ками переписались, всі цілі, все добре. І працюємо далі на благо нашої держави та наближаємо нашу перемогу. Скажу відверто, в мене в житті була ситуація не дуже приємна. 10 квітня 2022 року під час ліквідації наслідків одного з ракетних ударів я з моїми колегами потрапив під повторний ракетний удар. І так склалося, що однією з поранених колег була моя дружина. На превеликий жаль, після 11 місяців боротьби, після поранення вона не витримала, вона загинула після цього ракетного удару. І впоратись з труднощами в першу чергу мені допомогло. Це, по-перше, моя родина, підтримка моєї сім'ї, моїх близьких, моїх колег. І, по-друге, чесно скажу, мені допомогла викарабкатись з цього стану. Це моя робота. Тому що одразу після поранення, пройшовши лікування, я ні на хвилину не затримався, без жодної реабілітації. Я вдягнув форму і далі почав працювати на своєму фронті і робити те, що я можу під час війни.
He needs to do more for his community. He wants to serve his community, and that really drives me it inspired me and drives me to want to be like Igor. I think if there were more Igors in the world, the world would certainly be a better place. FireAid have actually been really great in terms of promoting my work and supporting me. They gave me the opportunity with London Fire Brigade to screen a premiere of my documentary film that I did with them at Somerset House in London to an audience of government officials, Home Office, Cabinet Office, Border Force, fire industry. I was suddenly in front of an audience that I never even dreamed I could get in front of. And to have the deputy head of the State Emergency Services of Ukraine be given permission directly from the President of Ukraine to visit the UK to come and see this film was really amazing. And so off the back of that, I've been very fortunate to gain a little bit more funding for a more kind of higher production value film. So I'm turning this concept of filming with the Ukrainian emergency services into kind of a feature-length documentary. I'm not doing this for any financial gain. In fact, I've probably never had any less money than I've got now. But I know that there's a time and a place to earn money, but there's also a time and a place to help people. I can earn money at any stage in my life. I can always go and get a job. It might not be the nicest job, but there's always opportunities to go and earn money if you're desperate. But this is a war. This is people dying. These are real people's lives. And if I'm not doing what I'm doing now, people will die. People don't get the same support. That, for me, is the main thing that's driving me to continue. One thing that I also realised in Ukraine is that there's a lot of people who say they want to volunteer. There's a lot of people interested in humanitarian volunteering, but the pull is never strong enough. The vast majority of people in Ukraine have been pushed by something as well, and that push is often something they're running away from in their previous life. And what I'm running away from is, I'd say, disappointment, because I felt like I'd failed in society's view of what it is to be an adult, what it is to grow in a professional world. But in reality, I was actually kind of being reborn into this world where I have a voice and I can use that voice to actually help people for a goal that I truly believe in.